than the old one. On the contrary, always having to defend itself against its depossessed and exasperated enemies, it would be more despotic and cruel, as has always been the rule in all revolutions. While socialists and communists regard the individualistic, capitalistic organization of society as an evil, and the anarchists regard as an evil all government whatever, there are royalists, conservatives, and capitalists who consider any socialistic or communistic organization or anarchy as an evil. And all these parties have no means other than violence to bring men to agreement. Whichever of these parties were successful in bringing their schemes to pass must resort to support its authority to all the existing methods of violence, and even invent new ones. The oppressed would be another set of people, and coercion would take some new form, but the violence and oppression would be unchanged, or even more cruel, since hatred would be intensified by the struggle, and new forms of oppression would have been devised. So it has always been after all revolutions and all attempts at revolution, all conspiracies, and all violent changes of government. Every conflict only strengthens the means of oppression in the hands of those who happen at a given moment to be in power. The position of our Christian society, and especially the ideals most current in it, prove this in a strikingly convincing way. There remains now only one sphere of human life not encroached upon by government authority, that is, the domestic economic sphere, the sphere of private life and labor. And even this is now, thanks to the efforts of communists and socialists, being gradually encroached upon by government, so that labor and recreation, dwellings, dress, and food will gradually, if the hopes of the reformers are successful, be prescribed and regulated by government. The slow progress of 18 centuries has brought the Christian nations again to the necessity of deciding the question they have evaded, the question of the acceptance or non-acceptance of Christ's teaching, and the question following upon it in social life of resistance or non-resistance to evil by force. But there is this difference, that whereas formerly men could accept or refuse to accept the solution given by Christ, now that solution cannot be avoided, since it alone can save men from the slavery in which they are caught like a net. But it is not only the misery of the position which makes this inevitable. While the pagan organization has been proved more and more false, the truth of the Christian religion has been growing more and more evident. Not in vain have the best men of Christian humanity, who apprehended the truth by spiritual intuition, for 18 centuries testified to it in spite of every menace, every privation, and every suffering. By their martyrdom they passed on the truth to the masses, and impressed it on their hearts. Christianity has penetrated into the consciousness of humanity, not only negatively by its demonstration of the impossibility of continuing in the pagan life, but also through its simplification, its increased clearness and freedom from the superstitions intermingled with it, and its diffusion through all classes of the population. 18 centuries of Christianity have not passed without an effect even on those who accepted it only externally. These 18 centuries have brought men so far that even while they continue to live the pagan life, which is no longer consistent with the development of humanity, they not only see clearly all the wretchedness of their position, but in the depths of their souls they believe, they can only live through this belief, that the only salvation from this position is to be found in fulfilling the Christian doctrine in its true significance. As to the time and manner of salvation, opinions are divided according to the intellectual development and the prejudices of each society. But every man of the modern world recognizes that our salvation lies in fulfilling the law of Christ. Some believers in the supernatural character of Christianity hold that salvation will come when all men are brought to believe in Christ, whose second coming is at hand. Other believers in supernatural Christianity hold that salvation will come through the church, which will draw all men into its fold, train them in the Christian virtues, and transform their life. A third section, who do not admit the divinity of Christ, hold that the salvation of mankind will be brought about by slow and gradual progress, through which the pagan principles of our existence will be replaced by the principles of liberty, equality, and fraternity, that is, by Christian principles. A fourth section, who believe in the social revolution, hold that salvation will come when, through a violent revolution, men are forced into community of property, abolition of government, and collective instead of individual industry, that is to say, the realization of one side of the Christian doctrine. In one way or another, all men of our day, in their inner consciousness, condemn the existing effete pagan order, and admit, often unconsciously, and while regarding themselves as hostile to Christianity, that our salvation is only to be found in the application of the Christian doctrine, or parts of it, in its true significance to our daily life. Christianity cannot, as its founder said, be realized by the majority of men all at once. It must grow like a huge tree from a tiny seed, and so it has grown, and now has reached its full development, not yet in actual life, but in the conscience of men of today. Now, not only the minority, who have always comprehended Christianity by spiritual intuition, but all the vast majority, who seem so far from it in their social existence, recognize its true significance. Look at individual men in their private life. Listen to their standards of conduct in their judgment of one another. Hear not only their public utterances, but the counsels given by parents and guardians to the young in their charge, and you will see that, far as their social life based on violence may be from realizing Christian truth, in their private life, what is considered good by all, without exception, is nothing but the Christian virtues. What is considered as bad is nothing but the anti-Christian vices. Those who consecrate their lives self-sacrificingly to the service of humanity are regarded as the best men. The selfish, who make use of the misfortunes of others for their own advantage, are regarded as the worst of men. Though some non-Christian ideals, such as strength, courage, and wealth, are still worshipped by a few who have not been penetrated by the Christian spirit, these ideals are out of date and are abandoned, if not by all, at least by all those regarded as the best people. There are no ideals other than the Christian ideals, which are accepted by all and regarded as binding by all. The position of our Christian humanity, if you look at it from the outside, with all its cruelty and degradation of men, is terrible indeed. But if one looks at it within, in its inner consciousness, the spectacle it presents is absolutely different. All the evil of our life seems to exist only because it has been so far so long. Those who do the evil have not had time yet to learn how to act otherwise, though they do not want to act as they do. All the evil seems to exist through some cause independent of the conscience of men. Strange and contradictory as it seems, all men of the present day hate the very social order they are themselves supporting. I think it is Max Muller who describes the amazement of an Indian convert to Christianity, who after absorbing the essence of the Christian doctrine came to Europe and saw the actual life of Christians. He could not recover from his astonishment at the complete contrast between the reality of what he had expected to find among Christian nations. If we feel no astonishment at the contrast between our convictions and our conduct, that is because the influences tending to obscure the contrast produce an effect upon us too. We need only look at our own life from the point of view of that Indian who understood Christianity in its true significance without any compromises or concessions, We need but look at the savage brutalities of which our life is full, to be appalled at the contradictions in the midst of which we live often without observing them. We need only recall the preparations for war, the mitrailleuses, the silver-gilt bullets, the torpedoes, and the Red Cross. The solitary prison cells, the experiments of execution by electricity, and the care of the hygienic welfare of prisoners, the philanthropy of the rich, and their life, which produces the poor they are benefiting. And these inconsistencies are not, as it may seem, because men pretend to be Christians while they are really pagans, but because of something lacking in men, or some kind of force hindering them from being what they already feel themselves to be in their consciousness, and what they genuinely wish to be. Men of the present day do not merely pretend to hate oppression, inequality, class distinction, and every kind of cruelty to animals as well as human beings. They genuinely detest all this, but they do not know how to put a stop to it, or perhaps cannot decide to give up what preserves it all and seems to them necessary. Indeed, ask every man separately whether he thinks it laudable and worthy of a man of this age to hold a position from which he receives a salary disproportionate to his work, to take from the people, often in poverty, taxes to be spent on constructing cannon, torpedoes, and other instruments of butchery, so as to make war on people with whom we wish to be at peace, and who feel the same wish in regard to us, or to receive a salary for devoting one's whole life to constructing these instruments of butchery, or to preparing oneself and others for the work of murder. And ask him whether it is laudable and worthy of a man, and suitable for a Christian, to employ himself for a salary in seizing wretched, misguided, often illiterate and drunken creatures because they appropriate the property of others on a much smaller scale than we do, or because they kill men in a different fashion from that in which we undertake to do it, and shutting them in prison for it, ill-treating them, and killing them. And whether it is laudable and worthy if a man and a Christian to preach for a salary to the people not Christianity, but superstitions, which one knows to be stupid and pernicious, and whether it is laudable and worthy of a man to rob his neighbor for his gratification of what he wants to satisfy his simplest needs, as the great landowners do, or to force him to exhausting labor beyond his strength to augment one's wealth, as do factory workers and manufacturers, or to profit by the poverty of men to increase one's gains as merchants do. And everyone taken separately, especially if one's remarks are directed at someone else, not himself, will answer, "No." And yet the very man who sees all the baseness of these actions, of his own free will, uncoerced by anyone, often even for no pecuniary profit, but only from childish vanity, for a china cross, a scrap of a ribbon, a bit of fringe he is allowed to wear, will enter military service, become a magistrate or justice of the peace, a commissioner, archbishop, or beadle, though in fulfilling these offices he must commit acts the baseness and shamefulness of which he cannot fail to recognize. I know that many of these men will confidently try to prove that they have reasons for regarding their position as legitimate and quite indispensable. They will say in their defense that authority is given by God, that the functions of the state are indispensable for the welfare of humanity, that property is not opposed to Christianity, that the rich young man was only commanded to sell all he had and give to the poor, if he wished to be perfect, that the existing distribution of property and our commercial system must always remain as they are, and are to the advantage of all, and so on. But however much they try to deceive themselves and others, they all know that what they are doing is opposed to all the beliefs which they profess, and in the depths of their souls, When they are left alone with their conscience, they are ashamed and miserable at the recollection of it, especially if the baseness of their action has been pointed out to them. A man of the present day, whether he believes in the divinity of Christ or not, cannot fail to see that to assist in the capacity of czar, minister, governor, or commissioner in taking from a poor man its last cow for taxes to be spent on cannons, or on the pay and pensions of idle officials, who live in luxury and are worse than useless, or in putting into prison some man we have ourselves corrupted, and throwing his family on the streets, or in plundering and butchering in war, or in inculcating savage and idolatrous superstitions in the place of the law of Christ, or in impounding the cow found on one's land, though it belongs to a man who has no land, or to cheat the workmen in a factory by imposing fines for accidentally spoiled articles, or making a poor man pay double the value for anything simply because he is in the direst poverty. Not a man of the present day can fail to know that all these actions are base and disgraceful, and that they need not do them. They all know it. They know that what they are doing is wrong, and would not do it for anything in the world if they had the power of resisting the forces which shut their eyes to the criminality of their actions and impel them to commit them. In nothing is the pitch of inconsistency modern life has attained to so evident as in universal conscription, which is the last resource and the final expression of violence. Indeed, it is only because this state of universal armament has been brought about gradually and imperceptibly, and because governments have exerted in maintaining it every resource of intimidation, corruption, brutalization, and violence, that we do not see its flagrant inconsistency with the Christian ideas and sentiments by which the modern world is permeated. We are so accustomed to the inconsistency that we do not see all the hideous folly and immorality of men voluntarily choosing the profession of butchery as though it were an honorable career, of poor wretches submitting to conscription, or in countries where compulsory service has not been introduced, of people voluntarily abandoning a life of industry to recruit soldiers and train them as murderers. We know that all of these men are either Christians or profess humane and liberal principles, and they know that they thus become partly responsible, through universal conscription, personally responsible, for the most insane, aimless, and brutal murders, and yet they all do it. More than that, in Germany, where compulsory service first originated, Caprivi has given expression to what had been hitherto so assiduously concealed, that is, that the men that the soldiers will have to kill are not foreigners alone, but their own countrymen, the very working people from whom they themselves are taken. And this admission has not opened people's eyes, has not horrified them. They still go like sheep to the slaughter, and submit to everything required of them. And that is not all. The Emperor of Germany has lately shown still more clearly the duties of the army by thanking and rewarding a soldier for killing a defenseless citizen who made his approach incautiously. By rewarding an action always regarded as base and cowardly even by men on the lowest level of morality, William has shown that a soldier's chief duty, the one most appreciated by the authorities, is that of executioner, and not a professional executioner who kills only condemned criminals, but one ready to butcher an innocent man at the word of command. And even that is not all. In 1892, the same William, the enfant terrible of state authority, who says plainly what other people only think, in addressing some soldiers, gave public utterance to the following speech, which was reported next day in thousands of newspapers. "Conscripts," he said, "you have sworn fidelity to me before the altar and the minister of God. You are still too young to understand all the importance of what has been said here. Let your care before all things be to obey the orders and instructions given to you. You have sworn fidelity to me, lads of my guard. That means that you are now my soldiers, that you have given yourselves to me, body and soul. For you there is now but one enemy, my enemy. In these days of socialistic sedition, it may come to pass that I command you to fire on your own kindred, your brothers, even your own fathers and mothers, which God forbid. Even then you are bound to obey my orders without hesitation. This man expresses what all sensible rulers think, but studiously conceal. He says openly that the soldiers are in his service, at his disposal, and must be ready for his advantage to murder even their brothers and fathers. In the most brutal words, he frankly exposes all the horrors and criminality for which men prepare themselves in entering the army, and the depths of ignominy to which they fail in promising obedience. Like a bold hypnotizer, he tests the degree of insensibility of the hypnotized subject. He touches his skin with a red-hot iron. The skin smokes and scorches, but the sleeper does not awake. This miserable man, imbecile and drunk with power, outrages in this utterance everything that can be sacred for a man of the modern world. And yet all the Christians, liberals, and cultivated people, far from resenting this outrage, did not even observe it. The last and most extreme test is put before men in its coarsest form, and they do not seem even to notice that it is a test, that there is any choice about it. They seem to think there is no course open but slavish submission. One would have thought these insane words, which outrage everything a man of the present day holds sacred, must rouse indignation, but there has been nothing of the kind. All the young men through the whole of Europe are exposed year after year to this test, and with very few exceptions they renounce all that a man can hold sacred. All express their readiness to kill their brothers, even their fathers, at the bidding of the first crazy creature dressed up in a livery with red and gold trimming, and only wait to be told where and when they are to kill, and they actually are ready. Every savage has something he holds sacred, something for which he is ready to suffer, something he will not consent to do. But what is it that is sacred to the civilized man today? They say to him, "You must become a slave, and this slavery may force you to kill even your own father." And he, often very well educated, trained in all the sciences at the university, quietly puts his head under the yoke. They dress him up in a clown's costume, and order him to cut capers, turn and twist, and bow and kill. He does it all submissively. And when they let him go, he seems to shake himself and go back to his former life, and he continues to discourse upon the dignity of man, liberty, equality, and fraternity as before. Yes, but what is one to do? People often ask in genuine complexity. If everyone would stand out, it would be something. But by myself, I shall only suffer without doing any good to anyone. And that is true. A man with a social conception of life cannot resist. The aim of his life is his personal welfare. It is better for his personal welfare for him to submit, if he submits. Whatever they do to him, however they torture or humiliate him, he will submit, for alone he can do nothing. He has no principle for the sake of which he could resist violence alone, and those who control them never allow them to unite together. It is often said that the invention of terrible weapons of destruction will put an end to war. That is an error. As the means of extermination are improved, the means of reducing men who hold the state conception of life to submission can be improved to correspond. They may slaughter them by thousands, by millions, they may tear them to pieces. Still, they will march to war like senseless cattle. Some will want beating to make them move. Others will be proud to go if they are allowed to wear a scrap of ribbon or gold lace. And of this mass of men so brutalized as to be ready to promise to kill their own parents, the social reformers, conservatives, liberals, socialists, and anarchists propose to form a rational and moral society. What sort of moral and rational society can be formed out of such elements? With wrapped and rotten planks you cannot build a house, however you put them together. And to form a rational moral society of such men is just as impossible a task. They can be formed into nothing but a herd of cattle, driven by the shouts and whips of the herdsmen, as indeed they are. So, then, we have on one side men calling themselves Christians, and professing the principles of liberty, equality, and fraternity, and along with that ready, in the name of liberty, to submit to the most slavish degradation, in the name of equality, to accept the crudest, most senseless division of men by externals merely into higher and lower classes, allies and enemies, and in the name of fraternity ready to murder their brothers. Footnote: the fact that among certain nations, as the English and the American, military service is not compulsory, though already one hears there are some who advocate that it should be made so, does not affect the servility of the citizens to the government in principle. Here we have each to go and kill or to be killed. There they have each to give the fruit of their toil to pay for the recruiting and training of soldiers. End footnote. The contradiction between life and conscience, and the misery resulting from it, have reached the extreme limit and can go no further. The state organization of life based on violence, the aim of which was the security of personal, family, and social welfare, has come to the point of renouncing the very objects for which it was founded. It has reduced men to absolute renunciation and loss of the welfare it was to secure. The first half of the prophecy has been fulfilled in the generation of men who have not accepted Christ's teaching. Their descendants have been brought now to the absolute necessity of patting the truth of the second half to the test of experience. End of section 8.